Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Alar. I'm president of the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin, and I'm moderator of our panel of experts today. I want to thank Dr. Chung and all the other staff of the Wiseman Center, especially Teresa Palumbo, for helping me set the panel together today and for setting this up. And thanks everybody for your attendance, and I'm sure that we're going to get some really great information from our panel today. Our panel members, their little bio is in your program. I'm going to just introduce them by name. They have their name tags in front of them, but you can read their bio on each individual. There's from my left to right here is Jennifer Moore and Clyde Fruits and Jack Steinberg and Kevin Thayer and Layla Thayer. Michael Thayer is not with us today, but he is the fraternal twin of Kevin, and Kevin and Michael are both children of Layla. So that's our panel member today. And I just wanted to commend everybody for managing your anxiety about the parking today. And also to the Wiseman staff for managing their anxiety about the timing of everything today. We do have a list of prepared questions that I'm going to go over with the panel. And the panel members have their instructions that they can pass on any question, and they're going to be passing microphones back and forth. So it's part of the logistics of this. And they're going to be answering these questions, and if we run out of time, and before we run out of questions, we may take some questions from, if we run out of questions before we run out of time, we may take some questions from the audience. So we're going to start with Jennifer, and the first question is, how did you find out that your child was on the autism spectrum? And if the person is on the autism spectrum, the question for them is, how did you find out you were on the autism spectrum? So, Jennifer?
Thanks, Nancy. So when my son was in the 1 to 2 year old room at his child care center, the teachers started to notice that something was a little different. He wasn't communicating with the other kids and kind of hitting occasionally, and they were great because they said, you know, maybe he can't hear. And so that kind of began a journey of trying to narrow down what was going on. And then we went through some birth to 3 services who finally said, you know, I don't know that this is a speech issue. You might ought to get an autism assessment. And so we were able to work with a provider to do the autism assessment. And so he was formally diagnosed when he was about 2.5. And so that's kind of how we found out.
I want to thank everybody. Well, way that I found out that I was on the autism spectrum, my mom used to work for the Autism Society, and when I was 7, I went to the office with her and I looked at the sign and I told her, you work for the Autism Society? And she said, yes, I do. And then I asked her, do I have autism? And she won't prepare for that question. She wasn't prepared. But anyways, I've been very excited because now with Mom, I finally get even more knowledge about all my autism out of her, and I hold so many events. What I really like is to just get the word about autism out there, and that's how I found out I was on the spectrum.
Okay, thank you to everybody. I found out, I had some services when I was in school and stuff. I didn't really know what they were for, but I really formally found out I was on the autism spectrum, actually, through searching Facebook for some groups regarding Asperger's, and kind of realized I lined up with the symptoms, and that was really how I kind of found my way in eventually to the Autism Society and realized I fit in with that group, and that was basically a self-diagnosis.
So my twin brother and I, Michael, we were both diagnosed, I think around the age of 2. Received an educational diagnosis through the school, received services. When I was, I think, maybe 11 and 6th grade is when I really realized that I was also on the spectrum, that I had, an Asperger's syndrome disorder, but that it really affected me. So we've been receiving services, educational and other services ever since then, until I found out.
I think it would be best if we hold our applause till the end because we don't have a whole lot of time here.
Yeah, so Kevin kind of touched on it, but having twins, there were some delays kind of early on, and looking back, some mannerisms that were sort of unusual around the age of 1 to 2, but nothing that stood out drastically. But around age 3, Michael, Kevin's brother, had some more sort of noticeable mannerisms that were concerning, and my husband looked it up online and kind of pointed us in the direction of autism. So I, at that point, contacted the school district, and they came out and did the early childhood, or the assessments, and they both qualified for early childhood. So that was about age 3.5. And then Michael, we pursued a medical diagnosis about age 4.5 through Katie Beckett. And then both boys had IEPs all through school.
Thanks, Leila. Back to Jennifer. What are your most important memories of you or your child being in school?
Okay, so my son is in 1st grade right now, so we're still pretty new to the elementary school thing. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is last year in kindergarten, they were working on a program for the end of the year, a kindergarten song, and oh boy, here we go. All right, so I just get a little emotional when I think of all these really good things that people have done. So he has high support needs, and so he has a one-on-one aide with him all day from the minute he gets off of the school bus. Actually, he has an assistant on the bus as well. But they put together a program, and he had been practicing right along with the class, and when we got to the gym, he was like, wait a minute, this is evening. I don't belong at school at night. I don't want to go in here. But he wasn't pushing and saying go car, which is our signal that it's time to stop and leave where we're at. So he kind of pushed through with the aid, and I got to sit with him in front of the auditorium of parents, and he performed right along with the class. And it was such a beautiful thing to watch him just be a part of the group and do what he could do with the group, and everybody really enjoyed it. And I think that's probably been one of my favorite memories so far in our short time with our elementary school.
I think one of my memories that I've had being in school so far and just being a 6th grader, that when I was younger, I really thought of myself as not having really that many friends, always feeling left out, lonely. And then when I got good news that I was one of the football managers, that just opened up the door for me, and now I'm even more connected. So football's really helped me a lot within my life, and it's just been a big influence on me.
I always consider myself fairly fortunate that I was lucky enough to go to Lincoln Elementary here in Madison, and they had really excellent teachers, and they really helped them keep things under control, so I wasn't teased as much. I mean, I still had some of the teasing and outcast stuff, but less than a lot of the other people, and I really felt like it was a place I belonged, felt safe and comfortable, which was really important, I thought.
Yeah, so I received strong school services. Was able to, school situations were good. Got a lot of support. Just through schools, I always felt like it was a little bit, awkward, just maybe a little bit shy or introverted, just socially. Wasn't as connected to the other students as I would have liked to be, but I didn't mind as much. I was a little bit set apart, but, I received good school services. I was able to generally do well in school. I was able to connect to other students, and especially when I got to high school and things really got difficult, academically and socially, I received a lot of school services through the Madison district, which were able to help with that, so it's important.
Yeah, so speaking for Michael, there were some good years, some not so good years. I think generally the people working with him had the best intentions, and he could be challenging with some of his behaviors and kind of day to day. As far as memories, I'd say the most interesting thing, Michael is 20, and he talks so much about those early years of going back to preschool. He remembers the names, he remembers specifics, he remembers exact things teachers told him. And a lot of it he didn't tell me at the time, but now he's telling me things that happened 15, 16 years ago, and I'm thinking, some of the stories aren't the best. I mean, in terms of the interaction, maybe things could have gone a little better from the staff perspective, but it's just interesting how clear all that is to him after all this time. So overall, I think it's been a good experience and certainly stands out to him above most other things in his life.
Thanks. Back to Jennifer. What is one thing you would like to tell teachers or school personnel?
I think for me it would be when you're caring about your student, we've been very, very lucky. We've had great experiences so far. And I think part of the reason for that is because we've had caring teachers that look at the challenges that my son is having, and they continually look for alternatives and other ways to support him. So, they found that in gym class, he wouldn't sit to listen through instructions, but he loves to run. So his assistant said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to run laps in the gym until he's tired. And then he runs and he runs, and then he sits with the class and is able to participate. So it's just enough of what he needs to be able to do that. They found an alternate reading program that would work with his AAC device, using his AAC device in him to help him learn to read his sight words. And it's been phenomenal to watch that, because then he's also developing verbal skills to go with that. So I think I would just say, get to know your students and find those other ways and other avenues to help support them when what you're doing doesn't seem to maybe be the best approach for their particular learning method.
Well, definitely one thing that I would tell teachers or schools is that make sure that your student feels like they belong here. I know that people with autism get bullied more than regular kids do. So even though people with autism may look like different people, they are really just the same as us. They are unique humans who just want to feel like they're part of the group. So what I would say, always include, never exclude anybody.
To expand a little bit actually on what Clyde said, I would also say make sure the other kids get training on, being nice and inclusive to people with disabilities and autism specifically, but also other disabilities. A lot of times the other kids don't realize that, maybe this person can't help their behavior and they have to behave that way, and, that's not fair to bully them or outcast them just for that. So I think that's right.
Yeah, and just that everyone on the spectrum is different, that it can be very subtle. These kids are often trying, but just to be kind to them, to accept them, and realize that, struggling with every day, even just little things like social interactions, different, things in school or academically that could be stressing them out, like in my case, just being kind, including them, recognizing that each person is different, that they may have subtle characteristics that, they still have autism, just being able to include them and just accepting them for whatever the situation is that we find themselves in with them is important.
Yeah, and this, for Michael, I think would be more directed at the staff. And again, I think everyone has the best intentions, and they wouldn't be going into special ed if they didn't really care about helping people. So I don't want to be critical of the teachers and the aides. But I think sometimes when the student is variable, as Michael is very inconsistent in what he can do from day to day, and some days energy up, some days down, mood fluctuations, anxiety up and down, it's very challenging. So there's some days he just can't really do that much. And I think just kind of reducing expectations and kind of just giving them the space that, yes, the IEP goals are great. Sometimes he can do it. Sometimes he absolutely can't. And it's not intentional. And it's not being willful or difficult. It's just he cannot do it at that time. So I think just being cognizant of that would be helpful.
Okay, next question. Kind of related to some of your earlier answers. What has been your personal experience with bullying?
We're still new enough at it, and with my son having an aide, I don't believe we have experienced that yet. But I definitely worry about that because I am anticipating at some point it is going to be something that we're going to experience and have to learn how to deal with.
For what I know, I myself haven't really actually had any bully problems with myself, but I can remember one time that out in 3rd grade I was playing flag football with some of my friends, and then another kid that I know who has autism, he wanted to join, but the other kids really excluded him, so I had to stand up. I gave him a chance. What I think that really bullying, it's not right. People with autism deserve to be treated like everybody else. That's just one of the key things that I worry about with people with autism.
I actually have had both extremes of the spectrum of bullying, and that I was fortunate at Lincoln that they had an absolute no tolerance for bullies, and they were the staff would come in right away and stop anything from happening, and it really made a very positive experience. But then for 6th grade, I went off to the brand new Wright Middle School when it first came into experience, and they didn't yet have a discipline policy or curriculum or anything in place, and so bullying was everywhere, and I didn't feel safe. And it's just amazing how the different extremes can be go from a very positive experience to a very negative experience that was hard to recover from.
Yeah, I can't say that I've experienced bullying a whole lot to the extent that probably a lot of other kids have. I have felt socially awkward, just socially kind of set apart, but I didn't mind as much for a while. Bullying hasn't been as big of an issue for me, but it certainly has been prevalent. It's something that the teachers and the staff have tried to work around, but just being important and just treating everyone the same and just intervening when that can be difficult is important.
For his brother Michael, since he was in more special ed and kind of self-contained, not as much in the regular classroom, Kevin was always fully mainstreamed. So Kevin was kind of more in the mix, having to deal without as much help. I think Michael was kind of off limits more, so he's somewhat protected by staff. So there were some incidents, not too bad, but just one point I wanted to make, just hearing others on the panel, is sometimes bullying can be very subtle, not just the words or even physical incidents, but I think even feeling excluded and that there's something wrong with you and you don't belong. I think that also constitutes a form of bullying, and I think that's something that is very widespread and a big problem.
Okay, this next question is sort of a two-part and a little bit complicated, so I'll try to read it carefully. As a parent or family member, what kind of behaviors by people on the spectrum do you find challenging, and how do you deal with it? And if you're a person on the spectrum, what kind of behaviors by people who are not on the spectrum do you find challenging? And how do you deal with it?
Okay, so Nancy, you've explained that question twice, and I'm still probably going to answer this in a very completely different way than what you intended. So when I think about the question, and I certainly think about some of the behaviors, which depending on whether it's right now or it was in the recent past, we've had different challenging behaviors. When I was thinking about the question, I was really thinking about myself and my husband and how we respond to my son, and so I find it challenging for myself and for my husband when I watch him, where my son will be, upset about something or reacting in a way that is not typical for us, and we sometimes find it challenging to adjust our responses to that. And so, when we respond as if he were typical, that normally does not go well at all. But when we stop and take a breath and go, okay, wait a minute, this style is not working, let's try something different that maybe feels awkward for us, that tends to be better for him. And so I think the challenge we have is continuing to check ourselves and how we're reacting to him and trying to support him.
As being someone on the spectrum, I find definitely some of my behaviors to be very challenging. Like, if I'm playing like a little game of badminton with my brother, I might always hit the ball. I might always hit the birdie very hard, and he'll sometimes get very upset, and he'll tell me repeatedly and repeatedly to hit it softer, and sometimes I just won't do it. So, like, if I'm dealing with that kind of situation, soon I will normally cope with that situation, and then everything will be fine. Whenever I'm worrying about some sort of like, for example, if I'm going on a vacation and my mom tells me there's something dangerous in that place where we're going on vacation, I might normally stress out to the days leading up to the vacation, just worrying myself to death. So what we really try to do is really just forget about it all, just focus on right now. And my mom will tell me that she's just going to keep me safe no matter what. And sometimes everything that we always bring to make me comfortable is headphones. So my mom will always do stuff to help make me comfortable.
As someone on the spectrum, for me, I think I find going to new social situations or places I haven't been alone can be very challenging. I can feel very awkward and like I don't know what to do or how I should be behaving per se in that situation. And that can be a challenge. Sometimes, the more I do it, the more comfortable I've gotten, I think is pretty much how it's been.
Yeah, I agree. As someone on the spectrum, it can be very difficult to adjust to new social experiences. For example, being away at the college environment can be difficult to just interact and really kind of find a place among kind of new social surroundings. I just find it really difficult too, especially with school and with just different interactions with other people. Some nonverbal cues like, eye contact or, the way that I'm communicating, subtle things like that. I can find it really difficult to effectively communicate and bridge the gap between people sometimes. And, sometimes I wish, typical people could be more understanding, but, it can be a communication gap, and just being able to bridge the gap, it's important to just interact and be understanding, be cognizant of whatever difficulties the person might be going through in day-to-day life, and being able to interact with them effectively regardless is important.
For Michael, his brother has had a lot of mental health challenges, a lot of anxiety, and again, a lot of inconsistency where some days he's very sociable and wants to talk to us all the time and everything's fine, he's in a great mood, and other times it's leave him alone, he doesn't want us to talk to him. It can be very difficult figuring out how best to meet his needs. I almost think we have to kind of be mind readers because there's a lot of kind of intuition, and we don't always get it right because he may say something, he wants something, and then he reverses himself, and you can really go down a really stressful path. So it it can be really challenging. We do the best we can to meet his needs and try to keep things relatively calm, sometimes more successfully than others, and it's had an impact on Kevin too. So for all of us, it's interesting.
Okay, back to Jennifer. What are your experiences or concerns about transition to adulthood?
Oh, well, we're 7 right now, and and I think while I definitely think about it, one of the things that I learned early on, and this is maybe going to sound a little weird. When my son was first diagnosed, it was very difficult to picture what he would look like older, right? So at 2.5, he's wandering around the room, he's not got spoken language, and doesn't look like he's able to pay attention to anything. And in my mind back then, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this what 17 is going to look like? Is this what 30 is going to look like, right? And then you take a breath, and then time goes by, and you go, oh my gosh, 7 looks nothing like 6.5, looks definitely nothing like 2.5. And so I think for me that helped, because at 17 or 35, we're going to look very different than we do right now. I also feel fortunate that, families like Lila and others who are farther along in this journey, the world is a very different place for our autistic loved ones, not where it needs to be by any means, but it's definitely, I think, there's progress there, right? And so by the time we get there, it's going to look a little different than it does now, I guess. So I worry about it, but I'm trying not to worry too much.
Definitely, I am really always getting some concerns now that I'm in 6th grade. Now I'm starting to get more homework, and I know that we're all really busy. I'm just all distracted by TV, and I can't find the time that I need to get all that done. So basically what I'm doing, starting yesterday, I created a little homework list so that I can focus on that list so I can manage my homework easier. But I'm always worried about, like, when I'm an adult, independent, how will I handle myself, like that kind of stuff. So not too much concerns really right now.
No, better off than I was at that age. For me, my biggest challenges was I was pretty much mainstream through school. My parents very wisely tried to encourage me to do as much as I could, and it was great. And then I went off to college, which is a logical next step, but I didn't realize that I was going to have social trouble because I'd kind of not had I never had moved, never had the experience of being in a new location, trying to make new friends, and that was really where I struggled when I had to, go to this whole new environment, and nobody was around, and I had to come up with new friends in the adult world, and that was really my biggest concern with the issue.
Yes, similarly, I was mainstreamed all through the school environment, through school, but I've had a lot of issues, a lot of difficulties, especially once I got to high school, with stress, with academics, and with the extent of schoolwork and the stress that was able to have on me. So, and socially, I've had a lot of challenges with that too, going on to college. So after high school, I started off the fall semester at UW Whitewater, but have opted, was there for a year and a half, but have opted to take the next semester off. So just being worried about school and social things, just being able to be independent and successful, in terms of a job and the future, and just being able to do something with a sense of purpose. That's kind of what I worry about going into adulthood.
Yeah, so I guess for us then it would be two kind of different paths, kind of helping Kevin along, and then Michael, who needs a lot more support. So kind of the usual long-term goals: where will he live? Will he be with us? Who will help take care of him down the road? And So just a lot of questions, and I try not to look too far into the future because there's a lot to be determined, and thankfully a lot of services and a lot of support, but there are, of course, the usual long-term worries we all have as parents and people on the spectrum.
Okay, next question. Who or what provides you with support in your life?
We have a really wonderful village of friends. We just have to remember to ask, and asking for support, I think, is a big challenge for us. We have a tendency to think we got this, we can do this on our own, and they're more than willing to help out. You've just got to say, okay, yep, I need it now.
I think the people who help me provide the most support in life are probably my good friends, my friends at my school, because whenever I'm right by them, I'm always feeling comfortable. I feel like I always fit in, but I think the most greatest supporter probably is my mom. She has really given me all of her knowledge on autism, and with her taking me to special autism events, I've kind of grown now with the genetic disorder, and it's like a miracle. It's like a miracle from God.
I've been fortunate to be fairly independent in my life, but I still do rely on some support. I mean, my family, my parents particularly, live real close to me, which has been nice. But also, especially in recent years, I've been involved with the Autism Society of South Central Wisconsin and another group of people with disabilities here in Madison called Love Inc. And they both, through their social groups, have helped support me also, which has really been nice. And of course, I'm employed, and my employer has been very supportive too.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of support with family. Parents have always been really an essential source of support. Also helped through the school. I was fully mainstreamed, but especially once I got to high school, had tremendous difficulty with academic stress and with other social and mental health challenges. So having a case manager to help me through that was really invaluable. Going into college, also having a disability support counselor has been very helpful, as well as just having other friends, other people I could talk to, and other counseling and social groups. Some that are targeted towards autism, as well as the family, have been important sources of support for me.
Yeah, I think family is key. We don't have any extended family in Madison, so it's just our family. But just having friends, people to talk to, people whose children have autism and some who don't, just kind of getting a balance. And Autism Society, some of the events, just to feel that there are people to talk to who have been through maybe not exactly the same situation, but similar, and they can point you in the right direction for resources. I think that all is crucial.
Okay, next question. What is one thing about your experience with autism that you would like to share with our audience?
Meet and listen to autistic individuals. It was one of the best things I think I could have done early on. Being able to be a part of this panel and listen to the experiences of Clyde and Jack and Kevin. Lila and I actually were years ago at a couple of Moms Nights Out hosted by the Autism Society, which were great for me to not feel alone and to hear their experiences. And 9 months into the official journey, I had an opportunity to attend a conference and hear autistic presenters. And for somebody who had not had a lot of connections, to my knowledge, with folks that were on the spectrum, it was a really great experience to be able to hear from. There was some twins there that talked about how they had not had verbal communication skills, and they were now in college, and they shared their journey, and being able to see their experiences and where they've gone, it made a big difference. Now I search out groups where I can learn more from autistics and get their perspective, because while I know my son, I don't know what it's like to experience the world the way he does, and we think about things a little bit differently. So,
one thing about my good experience with autism, that having autism is excellent and a little bit bad. Why I say it's excellent is because with this kind of skill, now I can do things that other people really do find hard, like definitely music, art, math, etc., etc., etc. But why I say it's kind of bad is that you have to go and get on all these, you have to really put in a lot of your time going to therapy. You have to really work out what you like and you don't like. You have to find ways to really get involved. You have to take time off classes. But overall, it's a great blessing.
One thing about my experience is that it does not have to limit your potential, what you can do. I mean, anybody can do anything. Being on the spectrum doesn't, stop me from doing what I want to do. It might have been a little harder to get there, but I can still live a fulfilling life and literally be whoever I want to and do whatever I want.
And again, just that it affects everybody differently, manifests different symptoms. There may be some common symptoms, but it can be very subtle, and that for the most part, I think everyone with autism is trying, they're doing what they can to really be successful and try to integrate into the community, interact with other people, be successful in the work world, etc. So, I mean, again, just being cognizant of the differences and just supporting them, being kind around them is, probably just the most important, way to ensure their success going forward in the long run.
Yeah, I would say it's easy as a parent to become isolated sometimes, especially in the early years when you don't know a lot of people and you're kind of just dealing with the day-to-day, and even just the diagnosis part of it can be difficult, just because even if you were expecting it, you have to kind of change your expectations for the long term, and it's easy to just kind of close in and not really reach out to people because it seems you don't have the energy for all the other things. But over time, I do think it's really essential to develop some network of support, people you can talk to. And don't always have to talk about autism. It's, I think, also good to have other interests and other things in your life besides dealing with disability and problems. But I think just trying to reach out to people when you need it, and again, also have your own interests and things that are meaningful to you.
Okay, thanks. Next question. What situation or situations cause you anxiety, and how do you cope with that?
Okay, so for, as I mentioned, my son loves to run. He's super, super fast. So for us, probably one of the bigger things that causes me anxiety is when we're out, especially if it's somewhere that we haven't already developed a really strong routine and habit with how we engage in that event. I'm always on edge because you never know when he's going to take off, and you got to catch him quick. And because he loves to run, when you start to chase, he goes faster. So, and I think kind of in line with that, the other piece of that is the looks and my perceived judgment of everybody else around us, and that I think has been one of the other things that's harder to cope with is, how do you just let that roll off and be like, oh, well, whatever. I know I look like I'm a bad parent because I'm not running him down, but if I do, it's going to get worse. And trying to cope with that for myself is sometimes hard. We had a situation where he just completely lost it in a children's museum up in Baraboo. And all of these adults are just looking on, and I felt myself getting so anxious, and then instead of responding to what he needed and just being worried about him, I found myself falling into that trap of, oh my gosh, these people are looking at us, you know, you've got to stop, you've got to put that stuff up, and it made it worse. And then when I left, not only did I feel bad, then I was like, okay, wait, you know better than this. You know that you shouldn't have worried about what all of those other people were thinking, and so that's something I continue to work on. Some days I'm much better at it than others. That was not one of those moments, but so that, I think the running and then just kind of the other people's perceptions of us is where some of my anxiety lies.
Well, definitely lots of situations can cause me anxiety. Like I mentioned earlier, going to a place and then my mom mentions something dangerous and then I scare myself to death. Through the days leading up to the trip, I'm always forgetting about it and just focusing on what I have to do. But another one of the things that really does cause me anxiety is sometimes loud noises like monster trucks, like stuff like that. So, like I mentioned earlier, we always bring headphones for that kind of case. And I remember that I was little, I used to absolutely hate going to the circus, and I was always scared when they would do the cannon. So I would go right up to my mom and we would do a little cuddle thing, and we still do that today. So those are some of the things that really do help me cope with all my anxiety that I really have today.
Dare I say that I get anxiety from being on a panel for the first time ever? Other than that, any sort of new or uncomfortable situation for me can give me anxiety. How do I cope with it? I try to think ahead and try to plan ahead, think about what I might experience while I'm there, and or like where I'm going to go when I first get there. That tends to calm me down, and deep breathing a little bit also helps. Just working through it, basically.
Yeah, I have had a lot of school-related anxiety, especially going back to high school. You know, I'd always considered myself a good student before, but, you know, the extreme demands of the new high school environment, the honors classes became really difficult, so just being able to cope with even day-to-day demands like that with school and just other demands has been stressful, but just kind of being able to make a plan, being able to work through it and allow time for other things has been important. I have a lot of social anxiety too in a new environment, day to day going somewhere. I'm at college and I worry about how someone is going to perceive me, so just, you know, trying to communicate clearly, not be awkward, just trying not to worry too much, prepare in advance, and just know that whatever is going to come, just be okay with it, kind of allow time for other things too is important.
Yeah, as far as my own anxiety, Jennifer, I could really relate to the public meltdown. We went through a lot of that with Michael. There were a bunch of times around age, 2 to 4, where, I mean, my husband would literally have to carry him out from a public place. We'd bring him to a zoo or some place that was supposed to be fun and relaxing, and he would get overstimulated, and it was really difficult. We had to kind of scale back and stop doing things as much. So I can relate to those days. But now I would say, related to Michael, it would be more along the lines of when I see him escalate and I get nervous, wondering how am I going to handle it in the moment, because it's so variable, and just trying to figure out how can I quickly nip this in the bud. Strategies don't always work for him, and they may work one day and not work another day. So again, just kind of tiptoeing around and trying to kind of work through those day-to-day issues can be anxiety provoking, dealing with it.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of our time here. And I'm going to ask one last question, which I will remind the panel that they can pass if they don't want to answer this. Have you had any experience with dating? If so, how did it go?
I believe that's intended for the gentleman in the middle here.
Oh, man.
For what I definitely know, pass.
Okay. I have, and it started out when I was in high school. I had a couple of relationships that I just wasn't ready for, and one unfortunately kind of took advantage of me, and it didn't go well. And then I went for 13 years without anything, and really got kind of lonely and desperate, and which unfortunately also, when you're desperate, can lead to things that aren't so good. The good news, the silver lining, that I went through all that, and eventually I, ended up with somebody who I was friends with for probably 3 years before we started dating, and it's so far been working out really well. And she's here in the auditorium, so it's been a good experience on that one. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I do not have personal experience with dating. It's always been something that, I've been a little socially awkward, who struggled to make friends or meet people. It would be hard for me to connect with someone in that way, but I do hope to, down the line, to be able to make that connection and hopefully long term find happiness with someone in that way.
Layla, do you want to try to answer that question at all? Or no?
Well, there's nothing for Michael to really share, so.
Okay, all right. Well, that's all the questions we're going to ask the panel. Is Teresa here? What? Okay, I just wanted to summarize. Jack mentioned that autism does not have to limit your potential. I wanted to really second that, and my connection to the Wiseman Center is also personal, and I wanted to add my thanks to this organization, the Wiseman Center, because my son, who is also on the autism spectrum, is now 41 years old. He was diagnosed here when he was 2, and he went to their daycare center for a number of years, starting when he was 2, and they were extremely helpful. We've had a long association here with their research studies, and he is now 41, as I mentioned, and he became the first person they ever knew of with a full-blown autism diagnosis to ever graduate from the UW-Madison. So, yeah. So do not sell the people in your lives short with autism, because they will accomplish things that you would never believe. So thank you all for coming today. It's been wonderful. Really appreciated the speakers.